Oh boy.
Whenever you go, big shot. It's all you.
Big shot. Alright, so obviously this episode is a little bit different. So I'm on the road right now with my buddy Dimitri. I don't know if he can show himself. No, he's not going to do it. But we figured this was a good opportunity to get this week's episode recorded and also just kind of have like a cool backdrop as we're driving. So what we're up to is we took a little weekend road trip to go and do an interview with Ari Weinswag of Zingerman's. So you may say, like, what is Zingerman's? That's a community of businesses is what they call it in Ann Arbor, Michigan, here in the U.S. So there's a lot of different businesses, but the core business is this delicatessen that's been around for 38 years now. We went and talked with Ari, who's the CEO. So we're on our way back now. We figured, like, why not? Let's go ahead and record an episode. And something that came to mind when I was talking to Ari a little bit ago, and just also while I'm kind of like processing our conversation on the drive back here, was this idea of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So what was interesting, and you'll hear about this in the interview with Ari, so that'll probably come out in a couple of weeks here. But the thing that surprised me, one of the questions I asked him was, like, how does he deal with the kind of the emotional component of all this stuff, and does he still have any fear, or does he feel pretty confident? And 38 years in, he makes this point about, oh yeah, I still get scared. Yeah, I still worry about stuff. I still have fear. Now, and I don't want to kind of spoil the surprise, but he talks about how he manages it. But it got me thinking a lot about how a lot of the stuff that you're going to experience as you start to build your own thing and as you start to figure out and find your way and all this stuff is those feelings and those emotions never really go away. So that the whole FUD thing, so fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I've experienced this too. So I've been working for myself in one way or another for about the past 8 years. More specifically on this Clever Beagle stuff for about 2 years. But what I've noticed as a recurring theme is over just the last 2 years, it goes in cycles. So like there's times when you're going to feel really confident, and there's times when you're going to feel fearful, but it's not something where you just magically hit a point and it just works indefinitely and you can just kind of sit on your butt. And hearing that kind of echoed back from somebody like Ari, who is incredibly established, is running, I don't want to misquote here, but I think the collection of businesses does something like $60 million a year in business, which is absolutely insane. And when you realize that a guy who's working at that level still has these emotions, it kind of gets you thinking and realizing, like, okay, this never really changes. And so what I want to talk in this episode about is how to manage that. Because especially in the, like, I guess you would call it like the pre-launch stages. So before you actually know that you're going to work on something, or before you know that this is even an idea that you want to pursue, you're kind of in this, we'll kind of start, we'll go through each of the emotions, but we'll start with doubtful. So, and I still experience this. I'm experiencing this right now. So right now I'm trying to figure out, how do I hire my first employee? So the guy holding the camera right now, I really want him to work for me to do content stuff. But no matter what I do, there's still like this lingering doubt. And especially the past few weeks, I've been dealing with a lot of sleepless nights. And for the longest time, like, I slept pretty well. But like the past few months, I've noticed I have this doubt. I'm like, oh, shit. Like, this is the next level up. And as I've started to realize, like, okay, I'm moving to that next level, I'm going to actually take this risk and do it, there's still doubt. So while I'm confident in what we're doing and the overall kind of vision and direction I'm trying to take the company in, I'm still in this position where I'm like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, like, I'll have, like, not night terrors, but, you know, like, you get that feeling where you're like, you cannot sleep and you don't know what to do. And so the way that I've been managing that is kind of thinking about, like, okay, well, always always be reflective on the past and kind of consider like, well, have you had any major like flubs over the time that you've been doing this? So if I think back like the course of the last 8 years, has there been really that moment that you always envision in your head, like the absolute colossal meltdown? And the more I think about it, I realize like, no. Like that's a lot of what you think about or you envision in your head is like, okay, well, now I'm stuck. See, so I got to drive and do this at the same time here. A lot of what you kind of think about or worry about in your head is just make-believe. And I heard a quote, and I'll have to dig it up, but it was, I'm going to say it was Thomas Jefferson was talking about this, but like, it was kind of like in passing, like, oh, the amount of energy that's wasted on worrying about things that never come to pass, something like that. And I came across that quote because I was kind of like trying to figure out like, okay, how do I calm myself down? Because it's a lot, and it gets really heavy, especially when you start to take your stuff seriously. And so it's really just a process of reflecting back on, well, what have you accomplished so far? And it doesn't matter if you've accomplished stuff that's related to what you're trying to do now or what you're trying to move towards, but more so figuring out like, okay, can you trust yourself? If you look back at your past actions, your past decisions, can you actually trust yourself? And then actually trusting yourself. So getting into the position or the state of mind where you kind of realize, okay, if I haven't completely like sunk the ship yet, what makes me think that I'm going to sink it in the future? Like now, you know, like short of like a developing drug problem or something like that, like is there any real evidence to you where you're going to screw it up or where things are going to fall apart, where you actually have some merit behind your doubt? And if not, you got to kind of just chill out and say like, okay, well, I've gotten this far, let me see where else I can take it, and not to the best of your ability. So I can't obviously tell you, because I'm still in this position, I can't tell you to not worry, that's impossible, but to at least not trust the worry as much as you trust the confidence. So go into it with kind of like this naive optimism of like, yeah, I'll figure it out, screw it, and just go for it and let things come to pass. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about the doubtful aspect. And then, so we're kind of doing this in reverse. So we're doing duff instead of FUD. So I want to talk about uncertainty. So uncertainty is kind of like doubt, but it's more, I should say, abstract. Like you're in this position where, okay, is it going to work out? I don't know if it's going to work out. Is this the right idea? Am I going down the right path? I don't know. And I kind of like, the thing I think about, especially with myself, because you don't see this like in the recorded stuff, but like I work alone pretty much every day. And there's times where I'll sit in my office and I work out of my apartment, and I'll just sit and I just have this hamster in my head just like, oh man, you're going to blow this. This isn't going to work. This is a terrible idea. And I go back and forth. So like a lot of the ideas and the things that you see that actually come out, those came out of a process of a lot of uncertainty and me bouncing back and forth for a while trying to figure out like, well, wait a minute, is this actually going to work? Is this actually a good idea? Or, well, wait a minute, what about this other thing? Shouldn't you do that? And I've started down entire paths and dedicated, goodness, 3 to 6 months at a clip on a project or an idea that you never saw, and then I doubled back. I was like, no, that's gonna work. And that was that kind of uncertainty poking through and getting me into this position where it's like, this isn't gonna work. And in a lot of ways I regret that, because there's things that are happening now in terms of the business, like certain things have dropped off a little bit due to decisions I made in the past, and those decisions were made because I was responding more to the uncertainty than the confidence. And so when it comes to the uncertainty, again, it's kind of related to doubt in that you have to go back and reflect a little bit, but also focusing less on the specific idea and how that idea sounds when you spell it out. And it's really helpful if you talk through stuff with other people. So not just kind of getting in your own head and be like, yeah, I'm a genius, of course this is gonna work, but like taking the time, and I'm talking like a few hours or ideally like a few days or weeks, to really write down and articulate what it is you're trying to do. And it doesn't have to be like a business plan necessarily, but at least some like kind of like bullet points, and try and figure out like, okay, I'd like to do this for this reason, for these people. And then really like work through the idea to the point where in the process of doing that, you're going to figure out, oh, okay, there's a gap here. Like I wrote this out, and between these two ideas, it just doesn't make sense. Or if you like, especially when you like go and tell it maybe to a friend or like a colleague, if you're working somewhere right now, like you tell it to them and they kind of go like, I don't know. That's a great way to fix uncertainty, because those are the things you're going to be uncertain about. Because you don't know like, oh, well, am I going to figure out this gap? It's like, well, you can figure it out now by very clearly stating and thinking about what it is you want to do or where you want to go. And we talked about this, and this is actually an idea that I got from Ari, the guy that we just finished interviewing today. So his whole thing and the way that he leads a lot of the stuff that they work on is this idea of visioning. And we talked about this, I want to say it was maybe episode 29 or 28, but relatively recently. So if you look up here on the channel, or if you go to SoundCloud and check there one of the audio episodes, but we definitely talk about visioning. And it's really this idea of not just doing a crapshoot, but actually thinking about where it is you want to go and what you're trying to get towards. And in the process of doing that, that will dry up a lot of the uncertainty that you have, because it's making it very clear where you're headed. There's less uncertainty. It's like, well, we're going to do these 3 things by this date. And then you're kind of working backwards from that point. You're saying like, okay, now what do we have to do in order to get there? And so immediately the uncertainty just goes, it's gone. It doesn't matter anymore. So that leaves us with fear. And fear is another one of those really abstract things, but it's one of the things that can really hold you back from the great things in life, or the things that you should be doing, or that you were, and this is kind of cheesy, but kind of like made to do, or the things that like you feel like in your heart or in your soul, like, oh wow, this is something I have to do. And the fear thing, just like all the other stuff, so just like uncertainty and doubt, never goes away. Like right now, to be completely honest, I'm not physically doing this, but in my mind, I'm shitting my pants. So I'm kind of like, how am I going to come up with all the money for this? How am I going to do all this stuff? But one of the people that I've been listening to a lot lately, who I highly recommend if you struggle with this, is Bob Proctor. Now, when you come across Bob Proctor's stuff, you're going to say like, oh, this is just a scam artist or something like that. Because a lot of what he talks about is kind of, it sounds like woo, or like woo peddling. It's like, oh, well, it's about your energy and your state of mind and the frequency that you're operating at and all this stuff. And at first glance, it definitely sounds like something that's like, oh, okay. But when you actually listen to it and think about what he's saying, it helps a lot. So it's this idea of the energy that you put out into the world will ultimately dictate what you attract. So this is this idea of the law of attraction. And yeah, there's a lot of charlatans out there who are going to be like, it's about the law of attraction, man. You got to attract it in your life. Now, the reason that I like Bob Proctor is he's very pragmatic about this stuff. So he's not just telling you to just think about it, man, and it'll come into your life. It's like, he's not about that for the most part. So he talks about that idea, but also backs it up with a practical element of you actually have to do something. You actually have to follow through. And one of the things that I've noticed in myself or in other people, especially when I'm mentoring folks, one of the things I've noticed where fear starts to crop up a lot is when you're not doing anything. So you're leaving this gap or this void for fear to come in. And so it's almost like there's some turn of phrase. It's like when you procrastinate on your work, like something, it fills the time, or the work fills the time that it takes, something like that. And I found that fear operates in a similar way. So when you leave a space for it, fear will just come in, because then you start to, and this is kind of like a byproduct of the uncertainty and the doubt, is you're not actually working through the problems. And And so you invent problems in your head to solve in the form of fear. So it's like, oh, well, what's going to happen? It's like, well, if you're not doing anything to actually go for what you want or to like fill in that void, well, then of course you're going to be fearful of it. And so the thing that I found helps is even if it doesn't result in an end product, meaning I want to achieve this. So like a good example is right now I'm working on this piece of software, Command. And one of the problems that I ran into the day before we left, so Thursday, one of the problems that I ran into is this feature I have is where the feed is like a historical feed of like a customer that you're working with. So you can see all the customer's activity and all the messages you've sent back and forth with the customer. And so one of the problems that I ran into is if that history is too long, you get into this problem or this position where, okay, now I have too much data. So when I do like an infinite scroll feature and I'm scrolling back, it gets really clunky and really slow. And the second that I stopped trying to solve the problem, I got fearful. And it was just like on a small level, but it was enough to be like a little upsetting, which was like, I was like, oh crap, am I gonna figure this out? And what I did to get rid of the fear was I just said, just bash at it. So one of my favorite scenes in a movie is in the movie Apollo 13, and which if you've never seen it, it's about Apollo 13, the moon mission, and the landing on the moon in, what was it, 69? Something like that. Somebody's gonna scold me for this. But basically there's a scene where they have this problem where like they're running out of oxygen and they have to, like, all the engineers back in Houston on the ground on Earth are trying to figure like, well, what do we do? And they're all fighting and arguing and freaking out. And then the flight commander, who was the actor? I think it's Ed Harris, but he's portraying Gene Kranz, like a real person. And he says this quote, he says, "Everybody stop it. Just chill out and work the problem." And I've always locked onto that phrase, working the problem. And I found that when it comes to fear, that's what you have to do. Just work the problem. Don't go in with any expectation of solving the problem in a specific way, but just go through that process of saying like, okay, I'm just gonna bash at this for a few days. And don't worry about solving it immediately. Don't be like, oh, well, I have to solve this in 2 days or it's just never gonna happen. It's like, no, maybe it takes a week. Maybe it takes a month. Like if you go back and look at some of the Feature Friday videos I was doing, it took me 3 months to figure out the revenue tracking feature in Command. That sucked. There were a lot of moments where I was fearful and I was like, it's not gonna work. But what did I do? I said, okay, I'll take a day or two off just to chill out. But then I went and bashed at it. And sure enough, it took me 3 months, but I got to the point where the feature was done. And so what happened in the process is the fear was driven down and I wasn't panicking as much. So that's it. That is a great way to think about fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So it's, when it comes to fear, so we'll kind of go the other direction. How are we doing on time? We don't know. We're gambling?
No,
okay.
Okay.
So fear is just doing stuff. Don't just sit idle and be fearful of never figuring it out. Actively work to figure it out. Do something about the problem. Don't just sit there and panic, even if it means that you're not going to get an immediately tangible result. With uncertainty, it's figuring out what your actual plan is. So it doesn't have to be in excessive detail, but enough to where you can say, that's where I'm going. And then giving yourself a path that you can kind of weave towards or weave down, as opposed to just kind of making it up as you go like, oh, well, I don't know. Today I'm working on this idea. Nope, I'm going to go over here now. I'm going to go do this thing. And then with doubt, it's being more self-aware and reflective about whether or not you've actually made mistakes in the past. So if you're worried about or you're doubtful about yourself accomplishing whatever goal it is you're going after, whatever, like in this case, whatever thing you're trying to build, really reflect on the past and say like, have you ever bumped into a situation where you actually screwed up? And then as you're reflecting on that, try and figure out, well, what did I do to get around that? Or what did I learn? Or what could I learn if you didn't reflect on it at the time? What can you learn from that experience and apply to not screwing it up now so you don't have to be doubtful? So, yeah, I think that's it. Hopefully that's helpful. I know that a lot of this stuff, it's really hard, and especially when you're first getting started, there's a lot of noise in your head, and it can really mess with you and make you feel like you can't accomplish anything. But like I just said, as a person in the thick of it, talking to a guy who's been doing it for 38 years, it doesn't go away. But there are tools that you can use, like we just talked about, to resolve it. And that's pretty much it. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. I really appreciate you watching and listening. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, and also click the notification bell to get a heads up as soon as these are released. And we're doing the podcast is coming out on Mondays, and then if you're also more interested in technical stuff, we're currently doing a new series called Feature Fundamentals, which comes out every Friday. So definitely subscribe and check that out, and leave comments below. So if there's something that you're scared about or something you're worried about, definitely talk to me, because there's nothing more helpful than talking it out and working through it. And I'm more than happy, because I know it's tough. So yeah, thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next week.